Hello, everyone, and welcome to another chapter of Murder in Stratton County, written by Elizabeth Spoon and Ryland Mason, narrated by me, Brian Shepard. Chapter 7, The Storm Takes Grip. Brian stepped into his office, flicking on the lights. The curtain was already open, and he could see the snowflakes starting to whirl around outside. He took off his coat and slumped back into his chair. Unseasonal time of year for snow, he thought. Debbie tapped on the door. "Sir, I took the liberty of giving you some breakfast. Dugan phoned me this morning and informed me of what was going on. I'm so very sorry. My condolences." "Thanks, Debbie." She placed a covered plate on the table next to the window with a Diet Coke can and exited the office, went back to her desk to answer the ringing phone. Closing the door behind her, Brian stood up and went towards the table. Pushing the curtain all the way open and lifting the cover on the plate to see what she had gotten for him. It was an omelet with wheat toast. He sat down to eat quietly, watching out the window at the people on the sidewalk. All of a sudden, Brian froze. There was a man staring up at him from the sidewalk. He was holding a camera. Brian leaned back in the chair to hide himself behind part of the curtain. "What the hell?" he said to himself. He leaned forward again to see the man taking aim with the lens of the camera, then turning and heading back down the sidewalk. "Brian, get a hold of yourself. It could just be a tourist taking pictures of the buildings. Coincidence, perhaps?" He watched the man go down to the end of the sidewalk where a woman with a shoulder bag was waiting. They crossed the street and disappeared around the corner. Brian felt an uneasy feeling come over him. He took a bite of his breakfast, popping open the can of diet soda. There was a knock on the door. Debbie pushed her head in and looked at Brian. "Sir, the sheriff called. He'll be calling back in about an hour." "Okay, thanks, Debbie." She closed the door again, and Brian sat eating and pondering the man with the camera. Then it occurred to him. That was the same couple he saw in Alice's place the last 2 mornings. He calmed himself, convinced that they were tourists, and finished the last bite of his breakfast. Pushing the plate aside, he reached into his pocket, pulling out his cigarillos. Lighting one, he took a long, deserved drag, exhaling deeply. He sat, pondering what all this could mean. Was someone conspiring against him, trying to ruin his political career, his good standing in the community? But who? Who would have an axe to grind against him? He placed his head in his hand, running his fingers over the still protruding bump. He needed answers, and soon. Walking back over to his desk, Brian pressed the comms button, which connected him to Debbie, who answered right away. "Yes, sir," she said. "Debbie, do you think it's too early to place an ad for a new housekeeper?" He thought to himself he would need to hire someone to take care of the manor. The house was big. Brian just didn't have the time. "I would be happy to help you, sir," she said through the phone. "Thank you, Debbie. I'm sure you will be able to take care of everything. Any details that you may need, just let me know. I know it may be too soon, but I'd like to fill the position as soon as possible." "Very good, sir. If I have any questions, I'll let you know. I'm assuming you'll be conducting the interviews? Should I have them sent here or to the house?" she asked. "I can always do them at the house after the holiday. Maybe the weekend would be best." Considering he didn't work on the weekends, he would have plenty of time to interview someone, hopefully quickly, so he could at least not worry about it for too long. Thinking about it now had Brian remembering the day he had met Prudence when he bought the home. Back at the station, Dugan was crunching all the information. trying to piece together some kind of motive, but without a solid suspect to investigate. This was proving difficult. Dugan picked up the phone and began dialing the number again for Dennis Malloy's office when Marks walked through the door. "Sir?" "What is it, Marks?" "We got a hit on the maid's stolen car." Dugan put the phone back down on the receiver. "A beat-up cop in a low-rent district of the city spotted it. He had it towed over to the city yard, impound. From what I gather, the car was trashed. He said it looked like someone had been sleeping in the back seat, and apparently the car suffered some mechanical trouble and was abandoned." "Well, that's a lead anyways." Marks sat down for a minute in the chair across from Dugan. "You look like crap, Marks." "Thanks. I'm pretty tired. I'm having the city boys fingerprint the car and bag everything and send it to the lab. It might yield some useful information." Marks handed Dugan another couple sheets of paper. "What's this?" "These are the witness statements from Larson and Foster." Dugan reached across, taking them from Marks. "Some date," Marks half smiled. "Now, let's keep this strictly within the facts. We can't poke fun at someone's private life, Marks." "Yes, sir. Sorry." Dugan smiled. "It is sort of funny. Anyway, maybe the car will give us some leads into who killed Wainwright and dumped her body in the pines." Dugan just looked at Marks. "Why don't you go home for a couple of hours? Get some shut-eye. I'll call you if anything comes over the wire." "Yes, sir. Thank you, sir." Marks left to go home and catch some sleep. Dugan continued to pore over all the paperwork and notes. He was wondering where Detective Malloy was. He should have been here by now. Dugan pushed his chair out to get up when the desk phone rang. "Hello? Sheriff Ratchet here. Hello? Hello? Is there anyone on the line?" Dugan waited another minute for someone to respond on the line. "Can you hear me?" Yes, he practically yelled into the receiver. "Who is it?" Dugan could hear someone talking, but it was garbled, and he couldn't make out what was trying to be conveyed. Then the line went dead. Dugan hung up the phone. They should call back if it was important. By this time, it was snowing hard in the mountains and starting to snow all over town. School was dismissed early, and out-of-towners were extending their stays at the bed and breakfast. Dugan grabbed a sandwich out of the vending machine and went back to his desk. As he chewed a bit of an egg salad sandwich, he reread the coroner's report and fire marshal's report. Then read over the witness statements and reports and notes from Deputy Marks. His phone rang again. It was Brian. "Any updates?" Dugan paused for a moment. "I'll stop by your office shortly, Brian." After both agreeing, he hung up the phone. Dugan pulled on his coat and hat and pulled his pants up, pushed in his chair, and gathered up all the folders and paperwork. Tucking them into his inside jacket, he left the police station and started walking over to the town hall to talk with Brian. Brian was sitting at his desk, writing notes when Dugan tapped on the door. "Come in." Dugan pulled out the chair and sat down. "What are you writing?" Brian just looked up. "Oh, just working on my speech for re-election, keeping my mind off everything else." Dugan gave him a grim look. "What? What is it?" Dugan began to tell Brian about his maid's car being found dumped in the city, and other details. Brian stood up and stretched. "So, does this mean that the killer is the car thief?" he asked. "Not necessarily," Dugan replied. "With this storm moving in, there's no telling how much things will be delayed," Brian said as he stood in front of the window. Snow was starting to accumulate everywhere. Well, let's go over what we know, Dugan said, looking out the window. Dugan pulled off his coat and set the folders of paperwork on the edge of the desk. He was about to start reading when the secretary tapped on the door. "Excuse me, gentlemen." "Yes, what is it, Debbie?" Brian asked if she could step into the office. "A weather alert just came in. Whiteout conditions through the mountain pass and heavy periods of snow with high winds. This looks like quite a snowstorm." "Thanks, Debbie," Brian said as he just looked at Dugan. She closed the door, leaving Brian and Dugan to discuss what contained so far as evidence and the stack of paperwork on the desk. Thanks so much for listening, everyone. Chapter 7-8 is right around the corner. I can't wait for you guys to hear it. Hope everyone is enjoying the weather and enjoying the podcast. Till next time.